For over 20 years, George Strait's son has lived in the shadow of the king of country music, carefully staying out of the spotlight. But now, at 44 years old, Bubba Strait's choices have revealed a truth that many suspected all along. This is the story of a man who had every opportunity to chase fame, but chose something entirely different. The whisper started back in 2009. Why would the son of country music's biggest star suddenly start writing songs with his father after years away from music? What was George Harvey Strait Jr. really running from? Or perhaps, what was he running toward? George Harvey Strait Jr. was born on May 14, 1981, in San Marcos, Texas. Everyone called him Bubba from the start. He arrived into a family that already knew tragedy's shadow, though the darkest chapter was still 5 years away. His father was just beginning to climb the country music ladder. George Strait's debut album had dropped that same year, but nobody knew yet that he'd become the king of country. The Strait family kept their home in Texas, away from Nashville's bright lights. That decision would shape everything about Bubba's life. Growing up in San Marcos meant growing up Texan through and through. Bubba learned to rope before he learned to read music. He spent weekends at rodeos, not recording studios. While his dad was selling out shows, Bubba was competing in junior rodeo events. The Strait household ran on 2 rules. Family came first, and you worked for what you got. Then came the night that changed everything. June 25, 1986, just before midnight. Bubba was 5 years old. His older sister, 13-year-old Jennifer Lynn Strait, was riding in a Ford Mustang with friends south of San Marcos. The driver, 18-year-old Gregory Wilson Allen, took a turn too fast. The car rolled. Jennifer wasn't wearing her seatbelt and her window was open. She was the only one who didn't survive. George Strait was home that night. He was at the scene within minutes. The family that had been so open with fans suddenly went silent. George stopped giving interviews almost entirely. He told the New Yorker years later that he just couldn't talk about it anymore. The Straits created the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation, which still operates today, donating to children's charities in San Antonio. But they never spoke publicly about that night again. For 5-year-old Bubba, his sister's passing meant growing up in a household shaped by grief. It also meant his parents held him closer, protected him fiercer. The spotlight that might have found him was deliberately kept at bay. Behind every decision the Strait family made was something rock solid. George and Norma's marriage. And it wasn't just any marriage. It was the kind of relationship that showed Bubba what really mattered in life. George and Norma were high school sweethearts in Pearsall, Texas. They knew each other forever in that small town. George admitted years later that he didn't even really notice her at first. Then one day he asked her out. They went on a date. Then they didn't see each other for a long time. But George had a realization. He told country radio station The Bull 100.3 that one day he thought he was missing the boat. So they started dating again. This time, it stuck. They eloped to Mexico on December 4th, 1971. A few weeks later, they had a small church ceremony back home in Pearsall to make their parents happy. Shortly after, George enlisted in the U.S. Army and was stationed in Hawaii. Norma followed him there. That's where George started performing with an Army-sponsored band called Rambling Country. That's where it all began. Their marriage weathered storms that would have broken most couples. After Jennifer's passing in 1986, many marriages crumble under that kind of grief. George and Norma grew closer. They created the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation together. They poured their pain into helping other children through charities in San Antonio. Norma made a choice early on. She would stay home and raise Bubba. No nannies, no delegating motherhood to staff. She was there until Bubba graduated high school and left for college. Only then did she start joining George on the road. George told People magazine in 2012 that Norma raised their son. She stayed home until Bubba went to college. That decision meant Bubba grew up with a present mother, even though his father was one of the biggest stars in country music. The Straits split their time between their home in northwest San Antonio and their ranch near Cotulla. The ranch had been in George's family for over 100 years. It was South Texas brush country, real cowboy territory. That's where Bubba learned what mattered: land, family, hard work, horses. George and Norma didn't do the Hollywood thing. They didn't move to Nashville or Los Angeles. They stayed in Texas. They raised their son around extended family, rodeos, and the values they'd grown up with. When George talked about his marriage, he kept it simple. He told people that Norma was the first girl he ever loved, that they were blessed to experience life together, to support each other through everything, good times and bad, that they loved each other and still liked each other a lot. That last part mattered. Loving someone and liking them after 50-plus years. That's the model Bubba grew up watching. Not a celebrity marriage held together by contracts and PR teams. A real partnership. Two people who chose each other every day. By the time Bubba was old enough to understand what his parents had, he'd already absorbed the lesson. Fame was temporary. Family was forever. The spotlight was fleeting. Real love lasted. Bubba graduated high school and headed to Texas A&M University in College Station. While there, he dove headfirst into competitive rodeo, not as a hobby, as a career path. After graduating, he joined the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association as a team roper. He wasn't dabbling. He was competing at the highest levels, traveling the rodeo circuit, building his own reputation that had nothing to do with his last name. In 2006, Bubba competed at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. His father performed there later that same night. For George Strait, watching his son compete before taking the stage himself was a full-circle moment. He told the Team Roping Journal in 2004 that watching Bubba compete gave him the greatest feeling in the world. Team roping was something father and son shared. They'd won buckles together. George once said those wins were the ultimate achievement. Not the #1 singles, not the sold-out stadiums, winning rodeo buckles with his son. But here's what people started noticing. Bubba was good, really good. Yet, he walked away from professional rodeo after just a few years. Why would someone quit at the top of their game? The answer came in 2009. George Strait released his 38th album, Twang. For the first time since 1982, George had songwriting credits on an album, and right there beside him was his son's name, Bubba Strait. The lead single was called Living for the Night. George co-wrote it with Bubba and legendary songwriter Dean Dillon. The song hit #2 on the U.S. Hot Country Songs chart. Bubba also co-wrote Out of Sight, Out of Mind, and He's Got That Something Special for that album. Then he wrote Arkansas Dave entirely by himself. In a 2009 interview with Cowboys and Indians magazine, Bubba talked about the experience. Writing with his dad was great, he said. They liked all the same stuff. They agreed on music for the most part. When asked about Arkansas Dave, Bubba explained he'd always loved stories about outlaws and slingers. He thought it would be cool to write an outlaw song. The track was loosely based on real-life outlaw Arkansas Dave Rudabaugh. George's producer, Tony Brown, said the song sounded like something Johnny Cash would have recorded. They had the harmony singer study how June Carter harmonized with Cash to get that flavor right. Bubba's voice had actually appeared on one of his father's songs years earlier. In 1992, he sang on Heartland, the opening track for George's movie, Pure Country. He was just 11 years old. But here's what was interesting. Bubba didn't want to be a performer. He wanted to write. George Strait told USA Today in 2015 that he was incredibly proud his son took an interest in the music business. For the longest time, Bubba hadn't shown any interest. Then he decided to get into music. He took it seriously and pushed George back into writing songs as well. That word, pushed. Bubba didn't just write songs. He reignited his father's passion for songwriting. George hadn't written since his 1982 debut album. Nearly 3 decades later, his son brought him back to it. Since 2009, Bubba has contributed to every George Strait album. Here for a Good Time in 2011, Love is Everything in 2013, Cold Beer Conversation in 2015, Honky Tonk Time Machine in 2019. Over 30 songs total bear Bubba's writing credits. In 2011, George Strait notched his 58th #1 single with Here for a Good Time, co-written with Bubba and Dean Dillon. It marked George's first #1 as a songwriter, an accomplishment he proudly shared with his son. Some of Bubba's other notable co-writes include Drinkin' Man, Let It Go, and Every Little Honky Tonk Bar, each song added to George Strait's already legendary catalog. But Bubba stayed behind the scenes. No solo albums, no tours of his own. He occasionally appeared on stage with his father, like in 2014 when they sang The Cowboy Rides Again together. But those moments were rare. While George Strait was setting attendance records and being inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Bubba was building a completely different life. In 2005, he met Tamara Shipman at a San Antonio Spurs game. She was a silver dancer for the team. They got engaged in 2010 and married that December. They settled in the Texas Hill Country just north of San Antonio. Not Nashville, not Los Angeles, Texas. Bubba and Tamara had 2 children, Jilliann Louise Strait and George Harvey Strait III, who everyone calls Harvey. Tamara became a successful realtor in San Antonio, working with Strait Luxury. She's also involved in charitable work, supporting organizations like the Methodist Hospital's Children's Center and Wish for Our Heroes. The family lives quietly. Bubba doesn't have a massive social media presence. He doesn't give interviews. When he does appear publicly, it's usually with his father or at rodeo events. In 2019, young Harvey joined his grandfather on stage at the Houston Rodeo to sing God and Country Music. The moment went viral among country music fans. 3 generations of Strait men sharing a stage, continuing a legacy. But even that was on George's terms, not as Bubba's debut as a performer. In November 2024, George Strait accepted the CMA Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award. In his acceptance speech, he thanked his family, his wife Norma, who'd supported him for nearly 53 years, his son Bubba, his daughter-in-law Tamara, his grandkids Harvey and Jilliann. They were all there, but Bubba wasn't accepting any awards. He was sitting in the audience, supporting his father. Then came the news in May 2025 that caught some people by surprise. Bubba and Tamara were hit with a lawsuit from a San Antonio construction firm. The couple had been remodeling a home in Bourne, about 30 miles north of San Antonio. Build Modern, the firm handling the renovation, claimed the Straits owed over $124,000 for unpaid services. According to court documents, Tamara had made decisions that delayed the project, including ordering back-ordered cabinets and hiring her own subcontractors. The lawsuit revealed something interesting. The project was being funded by Heritage Oaks Trust. Bubba and Tamara weren't just living comfortably. They were building wealth, making investments, living the kind of life that doesn't require spotlight or stage. So what has Bubba Strait confirmed at 44 years old? What truth has his life revealed? That fame was never the goal, that success doesn't have to be measured in sold-out stadiums or platinum records, that you can be the son of the king of country music and choose a completely different kind of kingdom. Bubba watched his father handle fame with grace for decades. He saw the toll it took. He witnessed how his parents prioritized family above everything after losing Jennifer. He learned that protection matters more than publicity. When Bubba left professional rodeo, people wondered if he'd failed. When he started writing songs, people wondered if he was riding his father's coattails. When he stayed out of the spotlight, people wondered if he was hiding. But the truth is simpler and more profound than any of that. Bubba Strait chose the life he wanted. He competed in rodeos until he'd proven he could. He wrote songs because he loved the craft, not the fame. He married the woman he loved and built a family in the place he called home. He works with his father not because he needs to, but because he wants to. Their songwriting sessions aren't about climbing charts. They're about a father and son creating something together, sharing a passion the way they once shared rodeo arenas. George told cowboys and Indians that Bubba took songwriting seriously. That word matters. Seriously, not desperately, not reluctantly, seriously. In every interview where George Strait talks about his proudest moments, he mentions two things: his family and winning rodeo buckles with his son. Not his 60-plus #1 hits, not his record-breaking tours, not his Hall of Fame induction, his family and rodeo buckles with Bubba. That tells you everything about the values that shaped Bubba Strait and everything about the life he chose to build. Bubba's contribution to his father's music is significant. Over 30 songs, multiple #1s, hits that will outlive both of them, but he did it on his terms, behind the scenes, as a writer, not a performer, as a partner, not a competitor. His children are growing up the same way he did, in Texas, around horses and music, with grandparents who show up, with parents who prioritize presence over performance. When Harvey sang with his grandfather at the Houston Rodeo, it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a family moment that happened to occur in front of thousands of people, because that's how the Straits do things. Family first, always. Looking back, the clues were always there. Bubba competed in rodeo before his father performed. He wrote songs with his dad, not for his dad. He built a life in Texas, not Tennessee. He shows up for family events but skips the red carpets. At 44 years old, Bubba Strait hasn't made some shocking confession or revealed some hidden scandal. He's simply lived his life in a way that confirms what observant people always suspected: that not everyone wants to be famous, that some people value privacy more than publicity, that it's possible to honor your family's legacy without duplicating their path. Bubba Strait is a successful songwriter, a devoted husband and father, a man who lives where he wants, does what he loves, and protects what matters most. He had every opportunity to chase his father's kind of fame. He chose something better: a quiet life in the Texas Hill Country, evenings with his wife and kids, writing sessions with his dad when the time feels right, rodeo events on weekends, charity work that makes a difference. That's not settling, that's winning. The son of the king of country music didn't need to wear a crown, he just needed to be himself, and at 44, Bubba Strait has proven that sometimes the greatest legacy isn't continuing what your parents did. It's building something of your own while honoring where you came from. What do you think about Bubba Strait's choices? Would you have taken the same path if you were in his shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed learning about the Strait family story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There's more country music history coming your way.